So you said what you said there. So I don't know if you want to read from verse 10.
Sure, if you want to go to, I mean, we're skipping a little bit. I mean, there's still a lot there, but
Wait,
yeah, we can
read it.
we can go to verse 10.
Yeah,
You want me to go to verse 10?
yeah.
1 second. Verse 10. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. And this is still speaking about the word here with these personal pronouns. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word, and this Word, who is distinct from the Father, with the Father from all eternity, and who is by nature all that which the Father is, then became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Do you want me to keep reading?
Right. Well, no, I think that was the part I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
So this shared essence that
Yeah.
you talk about, the shared divine essence, did it become flesh?
The divine essence doesn't become flesh. The
Oh,
eternal Logos, the eternal Word, who has the divine essence, the person took on human flesh. The
right,
divine essence doesn't become flesh. The
right.
person of the Son or the person of the Word took on human flesh. So
Okay.
he added a human nature to his person.
He added.
Correct. It's an addition. He's taking on a nature. Again, here it's in the sarkes, flesh in Greek. It's it's a noun and it's preceding a verb, so it's being used in a qualitative sense. So
Hmm.
he took on a human nature.
Nato. Okay, let's see what became means. Come into being. Oh, to happen, to become. So then, when we,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just saying. So when we look at the Greek, oh, that's interesting. So it's actually quite an interesting Greek word. Just make sure I got the right one. Became. Nato.
So what I'm trying to tell you though here is that when it says became flesh,
Hmm.
okay, hold on, let me go here in the Greek. So it's sarke, okay, flesh. Egeneto sarke kai sk osen. Okay, it's sarke is an nominative. It's being so it's the subject, and then
Hmm.
it's you have the verb then after it. So since it's in the nominative case and there's no article there, it can be either translated as the flesh, a flesh, or in a qualitative sense. Since it wouldn't make sense that the word became the flesh, the word became a flesh, it's being used in a qualitative sense that the word took on a human nature. So when I say qualitative sense, we're talking about the essential nature of it. That's what he took on.
Right. So when you say became, but as a Trinitarian, you're saying that that became isn't a full became. It's like an addition.
And no, it's a true full human nature. The human
Right.
nature that he assumes lacks nothing in which is essential to being a human.
Right. But you're saying that it was added to his divine nature.
Correct, because he's a divine person. He's a
Hmm.
divine person with a divine nature, and he adds this human nature. He unites this human nature to his divine nature in his singular divine person. Now,
Right.
the problem is what you're doing here, though, is that you're skipping. You've already forgot about the previous 13 verses, and you've skipped right to verse 14. You can't interpret verse 14 unless you interpret verse 1.
Uh, yeah, but you use 14 to interpret one. That's the whole point.
No. Verse 14 comes after verse 1.
Yeah,
And,
which is
and
why.
it's a prologue. So you have to start from verse 1, and that's why we started there. We've
Yeah.
already laid the groundwork. We already laid the groundwork that the
Hmm.
Logos was with God and the Logos was God. We've already established that.
Yeah.
So when you
But
come to verse 14, right, this word then became flesh, and
hmm.
he made his dwelling among us.
Yeah. So the reason why went down to 14 is because at the beginning we can't. It's not obvious that he's separate from God. But then by the time we get to 14, that's what makes it obvious. That's why
So
we
so
have to
you're
read
so
out.
okay, so is it your belief that the word is not distinct from God? Is that what you're trying to say, that they're not distinct persons?
No, they are distinct, and they're in different beings, because that's why one being can become flesh.
No.
Okay.
So so nothing in this text says that the Father couldn't become flesh. Nowhere in this ever does anywhere even hint at something like that. But here's the thing, again, you're skipping verse 1. It says that the
Yeah.
word was God.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? If he is God, that means that he's equal with the Father. That means that he possesses the identical nature as the Father.
Right, but it depends in what way. So what Trinitarians are saying is that the way he possesses it is that he's in one being. But what I'm trying to say is that that can't be the case because of what happens when you read down.
All that verse 14 is showing is that the Son and the Father are distinct from one another, and that the Son took on a human nature. This doesn't show anything of what you're trying to hint at. So can we agree with verse 1 that the Word is God? Do you believe that the Word is God?
Yeah, but there's a way he is God that we have to understand by reading the rest.
Okay, so when it says the Word was God,
Hmm.
are you saying that he's God in the exact same way that the Father is God? Yes or no?
Well, not in the sense that if the Father can't become flesh, then that means he's not in the same sense.
Where does it ever where does it ever say that the Father could not take on flesh?
Well, then we'd have a problem because remember what Paul says about how we exist in the Father. So
No,
we don't
where
want
does
to.
it ever say? Where does it ever say that the Father can't take on flesh? And how would that how does that even relevant to the Son being um, absolute deity as well? How does that even relevant?
Well, because one of the big advantages with the Son is that uh, because as I believe he's separate, that means he can come and speak to us without us all dying, and he can go into death as well, which the Father can't do either of those things.
So he's distinct from the Father. So maybe we should start with this. What can you give me just a one sentence definition of what a Trinitarian believes?
Yeah, yeah, you believe that there are three persons, co-equal, co-eternal, and they have one, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in one essence.
They possess the identical nature. Okay. So you recognize that we believe that the Father, Son, and Spirit are distinct from each other, correct?
Yeah, three persons in one being.
Right. Okay. And that each person is equal to one another, correct?
Well, the problem is that you say equal, but then we need to know exactly what a Trinitarian means by equal.
Yeah, they possess the same divine essence.
Yeah, but their roles are different though.
Having different roles doesn't make someone less equal than someone else. So for example, my wife is my wife. We have different roles, right?
Hmm.
She even supposed to submit to her husband. We have different roles, but that doesn't say anything about our essential nature. We're equal according to our essential nature.
Right, but
Different roles doesn't has nothing to do with someone's ontology.
Right, but if something big went down and God came looking, who would you talk to first?
And what'd you just say?
No, if something went down, in relation to,
Yeah.
you know, in any, I'm obviously linking this to something else, but if something went down in relation to you and your wife, who would God come talking to first?
He would come to me.
Yeah, there you go. So there's obviously some difference there.
Again, difference in roles doesn't equal inferiority according to essential nature, though, and that's what we're debating. We're debating as if the Father and the Son are equal according to their nature. Just because they have distinct roles from each other doesn't mean anything. Yeah, we believe that they're distinct from each other. And because they're distinct from each other, they have distinct roles as well. But they also have some that are the same roles as well, such as creator, such as redeemer. That's why they're given the same names and titles and things of that nature. So you're correct. You're correct in the sense that embedded in the titles Father and Son, it implies that they have distinctive roles.
Right.
And this is why that we can say that the Father and the Son are distinct from each other, because from all eternity the Father begot the Son, and from all eternity the Son is begotten of the Father. So yes, there is distinctions, and from these distinctions, which we call their personal properties, then flows distinctive roles. So the Father is the one who sends the Son, and the Father and the Son are the one who send the Spirit.
Right.
But where you're getting confused though is that because someone has distinctive roles means that they can't be equal with one another according to their nature.
Well, it depends. That's what I'm saying about depends what you mean by equality, because who is in authority of the three of them?
So if you're talking post incarnation, the whole point of the whole reason why the Son took on a human nature is for the sake of redemption. Prior to the incarnation, the Son is not subordinate to the Father. You can't find any passage in the Bible which speaks of an eternal subordination. So it's only for the sake of redemption that the Son, he again, Philippians 2 says that he's the one who humbled himself.
Hmm.
Right? So we'll find in the Gospels where the Father is said to have sent the Son, but we also find in Philippians 2 that the Son willingly and voluntarily humbled himself. It was of his own that he humbled himself.
Yeah.
So
So,
so just because the Son took on human flesh doesn't mean that he isn't it doesn't negate John 1:1, which says that he was God.
right. But here's the interesting thing. Remember you said about how before the incarnation there was no subordination.
All right.
So if we go to this Philippians 2, if we go to verse 5, it says that let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. So
Yeah.
this, if we go by how the verse is laid out, would this part, verse 6, be like
Mhm.
pre-incarnation?
So you're saying is verse 6? Are you asking me if verse 6 is pre-incarnation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Uh, so it's speaking about what happened in the incarnation. So although he was in the form of God, he did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, or he didn't cling to or grasp to this equality that he had with God, but made himself of no reputation. Now, very interesting enough, again, it's active. It's an active participle, if I remember correctly. So it's he actively remained in the form of God, even in virtue of humbling himself in the form of a man.
Right. But then, if we go by how you're saying it, then this would be swapped around. It would say he made
What would be
himself of no,
swapped around?
well, it would say, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant. Then you go to who being still being in the form of God. But what I'm trying to say is that when you read it, verse 6 comes before verse 7, implying that this is how he was before, and then he made himself of no reputation.
What I'm trying to tell you is that the who being in the form of God is active,
Hmm.
meaning that he continues to be in the form of God, even when he made himself of no reputation. That this is just simply what it's saying in the Greek. This is just the grammar behind it. I mean, you're just arguing against grammar at this point.
Yeah, but then why is it saying being in the form of God?
So here, it's huparkon, right? Existing, and
Hmm.
it's a present participle active. Okay,
Hmm.
so he's existing in the form of God. And although he was by nature very God, this is what he did. He didn't grasp to this equality that he had with God, but
Right.
himself he emptied. And we're told what this emptying is, right?
Uh,
He I'm sorry, where am I? But made himself of no reputation, taking upon the form of a servant and coming in the likeness of man. I guess I'm in a different translation where it said emptied. In the New King James, it doesn't say emptied.
yeah,
But
that's
it tells us in the
NIV.
other translations, what it means by that he emptied.
Hmm.
He emptied himself by becoming man. So it's a subtraction by way of addition, if you
Right, but
understand what I mean. I'm gonna go to a different translation real quick.
yeah, but I was
Go
just
ahead.
trying to go back to the verse 6 where it says who in
Yeah.
the form. So form, of course, in Greek is morphe, but we know what morph
Mhm.
means. You know, that's a sort of Englishy word. So if we were going by a Trinitarian, then the writer of Philippians wouldn't need to bother with the form part.
Say that last part. I didn't hear the last
No,
part.
no. If the writer of Philippians was a Trinitarian, they wouldn't have used the morphe word.
Why not?
Not because it's remember Trinitarians believe three gods in one person. So
No, we don't believe
where
in three
would
gods in one person, one
no
God
that's
in three persons.
yeah, three person. All right, but so they wouldn't have said that he was morphe of God. A Trinitarian wouldn't have said that.
Why not? That's just an argument from silence. Why not? The
Yeah.
term being in the form of God, some translations has that he's by nature very God. Uh,
Well, it,
it's speaking of who he Christ is. It's
it,
telling us that he is God. The morphe tou theou, it's just that he's in the form of God. He is God.
yeah, but this morphe word, yeah, I mean, you know, it's quite a big word.
Well, I mean, I think that it's only used two times, and it's in the
Yes,
New Testament at least. And the
yes,
other term is here. It says form of God, form of a servant. So how do you understand form of a servant? Was he truly a servant?
yeah, but when it says form, obviously, it means that he, they're trying to link servant to be obviously human servants, but he's not exactly a human servant.
Absolutely was a human servant. I mean, he was.
Uh,
He absolutely was. He had a human nature, and he came as the suffering servant. And he even tells us that he gives the disciples an example in John 3. He washes their feet. Right. This is what the masters are to do. They serve. So
but
yeah, he is.
right, but here's the thing though, is that would he still have the morphe of God when he makes himself of no reputation?
And that's what I'm telling you, that you're arguing against grammar here, because huparkon, existing in the form of God. This word existing, this verb is a
Hmm.
a I just messed it up. One second. It's a present participle active. So he continuously in the present existed in the form of God. That's what I'm trying to say to you. You're arguing against the grammar here.
No, no, what I'm saying is that this is telling you what happened in sequence. So you have six and then seven. So it's
Right.
explaining
Yes, I agree. There's a sequence.
six is
Yep.
what became 7.
What was that?
No, the way I read it is that we read 6, and then 6 is explaining who became in what it describes in verse 7.
Yes, but what I'm telling you is that in verse 6, he doesn't stop being that which he is in verse 6. When he goes transitions into verse 7, because it tells us that it's a present participle active, he continues to exist in the form of God, as well as now being in the form of a man.
Right. So,
That's what the grammar tells us.
all right. So if we, it seems like this keeps jumping around because you get a different word depending on.
What are you looking at right now?
No, I'm just looking on the Bible Hub. I think then, but if we look at just what there's like a pop up comes up, and it's talking about emptied. It says the meaning
Yeah.
is deprive of content, make unreal, from kenos, make empty, to abase, neutralize, falsify. So if someone is deprived of content or made empty, would they still have a divine nature in them?
Yeah,
They've been
so
neutralized.
you have to read the context. Do you agree that context determines the meaning of words?
Yeah, well, the context says that he was in the form
All
of
right.
God, but then became emptied or
Okay, so
void.
you didn't keep reading though. He but emptied himself and keep reading
Yeah, the form of a
by
servant.
taking the form of a servant. So
Yeah.
by taking the form of the servant is an addition. He emptied himself not by that which he was, but he emptied himself by way of adding a human nature to himself.
But it doesn't say adding, it says taken. Take as in
Yes,
take.
if you
So
take something, he took on a human nature. That's adding something to himself.
okay, so but then that means the void part didn't happen.
No, it tells, look, the by is
Hmm.
functioning as explanatory. It's telling us what it means that he emptied himself. He emptied
Yeah,
himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of man, being
right,
found in human form. This
right.
is
So
what it means that he emptied himself. You're trying to say that emptied himself means that he ceased to be God.
well, you have to empty of something.
He emptied himself by way of addition. So, for example, let me give you an example, okay?
Well,
Let
okay.
me give you an example. Have you
All right.
ever played sports before?
Say that again.
Have you ever played sports before?
Sports.
Sports like football, basketball, soccer,
Yeah,
baseball.
yeah, football.
All right. So, if you've ever played like a football game with your friends or something, and
Hmm.
there's that one person who like no one wants to pick for their team because they're really bad, that they're so bad that if you add them to your team, you're actually going to get worse. That's the example that's being laid out for us here. The way in which he emptied himself or humbled himself was by way of addition. So remember, in verse 6, we're told that he's in the form of God and he didn't
Hmm.
grasp this equality that he had with God,
Hmm.
but he laid aside these divine prerogatives that he had by veiling his glory in his human nature that he took on.
Say that again. Veiling is
Yeah, so his glory, his divine nature, is veiled by the human nature that he assumes.
right.
And this is what we see. This is what we see in Matthew 17 in the Transfiguration, right? Where his inerrant divine glory is apparent, is seen, right? They can't even look at him. His light and that which radiates from him. That's his divine nature being shown through his human flesh at that point.
yeah, but remember it's called transfiguration. It didn't say Because that isn't something coming from outside. That's a transformation.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. It's something that's coming from within him.
Right.
That's the problem for your position.
But you realize that would mean then that when so that would then make it that he would be unkillable then.
Unkillable? Well, no, because he still had a human nature. Again, we already spoke about what died. When Christ died, we're told that his body died, and we know that our soul doesn't die, right? When after physical death. So his human soul remained united to his divine soul, but it was just his body that died. The divine nature did not die. The divine nature cannot die. As you rightfully state, God cannot die. But God incarnate can die because what dies is the human body that died.
Oh, all right. So you've explained all those things. So if I go, so what do you think about how I see it instead, which is that he's a separate person, and going by what I've read in 6 and 7, that what happened is
Mm-hmm.
that because he's a separate person, that means that he's um the form of God he was in could be removed, and his person could be put into fully into a human body. You think that's possible?
So, so again, and this will be my last time going through this one because I've said it like 5 times.
Hmm.
Existing in the form of God is a present participle active. He actively remained in the form of God even when he emptied himself by taking upon the form of a servant. When he
Yeah.
took on the form of a servant, he remained to be truly God, but he added a human nature. So he, just like it says in John 1:14, and the word became flesh. The word was with God, the word was God, John 1:1, verse 14, the word became flesh, being used in a qualitative sense. He took upon our very nature, thereby
All right.
being very God and very man.
All right. So verse 6, he'd be alive at that point, obviously. So
Of course,
him
yeah.
being yes, for him being alive in 6, he takes on the nature in 7 that we're reading here and becomes human. So by
Mhm.
taking on the human form, that's you're saying that's what makes him have the form of a servant now. So if that human form is then killed, that would then reveal the internal form.
Confounded.
Yeah?
So I don't really know what you're saying. So yeah, I mean, when Christ bodily died,
Hmm.
he says on the thief on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. So after he died, he was seen by those in heaven while he was there
Yeah.
in a spiritual way because he doesn't have a body.
Oh,
So yeah,
but that's the problem though. So when he in verse 6, he would have had a body, the form which is like God, that body.
yeah. So I guess I didn't really understand your question.
No, what I'm saying
So
is
you're
that if
saying that so you're saying did they see him in the form of God when
no,
he after he had died on the cross?
what I'm saying is that if we go by what you're saying and saying that in verse 6, he has the form of God, and then in order to be
Hmm.
the form of a servant, he go from what you're describing, it sounds like he goes into the human nature and it covers him, if I'm going by what you're saying. So now, if that human nature dies, then that means the cover should come off. And so on the day when he died, we should have just seen this form of God revealed, if we go by what you're saying.
Again, but I'm telling you, when he died, he went to the Father. That's like saying you can see the Father. You can see the Father right now
Yeah,
because he doesn't
yeah,
have a body. But no, that's not the case.
yeah. But I don't think you get what I'm saying in that I'm trying to reverse what you've done with verse 6 and 7. It's the way
I
that
mean, I
you've
didn't do
said
anything.
it.
This is what it says.
No, but you're trying to read it in a way where he becomes emptied by taking on something. But then that's in addition, isn't it?
Well, literally, what you just said is you quoted the verse verbatim and said that that's what I said. And yeah, you're correct. My position is directly from Scripture. The word by there is telling us what it means that he emptied himself. You're the one who's taking the word emptied in isolation. You went to the concordance or a dictionary, you looked up the word, and you said he emptied. And then you pointed it back to he emptied himself of being the form of God. But the
Yeah.
word by tells us what it means that he emptied himself. He emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. And
Yeah.
again, to go back to the hyparchon existing in the form of God, it's a present participle active. He remained and continued in the form of God, even when he took upon the form of a servant.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that my way of describing it makes more sense for how he could die. It's just that your way of describing it just says that the if the flesh part died, he'd then be
Yes,
back in the form of the a form of God.
he
See
was
what I'm saying?
always in the form of God. Even when he
Yeah,
died, he
yeah.
was in the form of
That,
God.
that's what I'm
The,
saying.
the,
So
the
the
problem, what I don't understand about your, because you guys did this last time, you went down this path. This is
mm,
this is like so. This is just complete common logic. When a human dies, what happens? Their body dies. Where does
right,
their soul go? Their soul remains alive. Okay,
yeah,
so when
but
Christ dies, the body dies. The divine nature doesn't suffer. The divine nature is impassible. It cannot suffer. It does not change. Right? The human body died. That doesn't mean
right,
that you would then see him. What about if he didn't want you to see him in his unveiled glory? Right?
right, but
So that question just doesn't make any sense.
right, but then here's the problem with that is remember in the garden Jesus said that he didn't want the cup let the cup pass from him. So why
Hmm.
would he have been so concerned if he still had his form of God in him? Because then that means he wouldn't have to suffer. And this even sounds like one of the Gnostic. I don't know which Gnostic gospel he is, where he's on the cross and he's laughing at the people who are killing him because he's not
Yeah.
suffering. But then if he is fully human without any kind of as you'd say, divine nature to stop the pain, etc., then of course you can understand why he would say to take the cup from him. So I'm saying that going by what happened and the way Jesus wanted, obviously knew how painful it was going to be. That makes me go by the fact that verse 6, that form of God he had was taken in 7, making him a full human, which is why he went through the full, pain that a human would. Whereas the way you're saying it,
No,
the divine nature can protect him on the cross.
no. So you got a lot of things wrong here. Number one, it says that he humbled himself. Okay,
Yeah.
taking upon the form. He's the one who humbled himself. He actively humbled himself. That's number one.
Mm.
Number two, what you're seeing in Gethsemane, okay, is that he's truly human.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what I'm
and
saying.
this is what necessary. The Leviticus 17:11 says that the life is in the blood, and that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. In John chapter 12, Jesus says, Father, save me from this hour. This is the very reason why I came to this hour. Okay, so Christ is the one who willingly humbled himself, knows that this is all coming. He's omniscient, he knows all things. But what
Mm.
we're seeing here in Gethsemane is that he's truly human, that he is going to suffer the fullest. He's not going to rely on his divine nature to lessen the pain that's coming. He's going to be crushed under the wrath of the Father for the sins of the world there on the cross. And he can only represent God if he is truly God, and he can only represent man if he is truly man. And this is the gospel in which I preach to you, because if you deny this gospel, there is no hope for you. This is the Christ that you must believe in order to be saved. It is God who took on a human nature, who loved us and gave himself for us to die from our sins so that we can be reconciled to the Father through him by the Spirit.
Right, yeah, yeah, but here's the thing. It's a good thing you quoted that Leviticus 17:11 because it says the life is in the blood. But if we go back to this Philippians 2 and 6, when he was in the form of God, was his life, because remember, even in John 1, we were talking about the life, he had life in him. Was his life in the human nature? So, sorry, in the divine nature, when he's in the form of God?
The divine nature is the exact same divine nature that the Father has. So
Yeah,
all
but,
the
but,
attributes of which the divine nature has is the same that the Son has as well.
yeah, yeah,
Anything that we see of change, suffering, crying, weeping, all of this is can be attributed to his human nature. This is what we
yeah,
call the communicatio idiomatium, that the
right.
attributes of the divine nature and the attributes of the human nature, they're incommunicable. They don't, the divine attributes don't, aren't transferred to the human nature and vice versa. It's a true human nature, and he also has a true divine nature.
Yeah, yeah, I know, but what I'm trying to find out is where was his life?
Where was his life?
Yeah, because the life's in him, isn't it?
What does that even mean? In him was life, yes. According to the
Yeah,
divine nature, he's ase, he's of himself. And he
yeah. So,
has that
so
life to give to others. That's why we see him performing divine miracles as well, raising the dead and things of that nature.
yeah, but the when before he made himself a servant, his life would be in his divine nature,
Correct.
right? So, but then remember, in order to be able to die, the life now has to be in his blood, which is in his human nature.
No, the human
Uh,
nature has a human
uh,
blood, and when he dies, he bodily dies.
yeah, but where was his
This
life?
logic is very simple.
Yeah, but where was his life when he was human?
In the divine nature, again, the divine nature doesn't change.
So see, now you're talking against Leviticus. So that means you're saying that his sacrifice wasn't real.
Okay, so I get what you're saying now. So there's two senses
Yeah.
of life in which we're talking about now. The
Right.
life in John 1:4 is the life of which God possesses in himself.
Hmm.
The other life of which human life, Leviticus 17:11, life being in the blood, that is rightfully in his human nature. So
Right.
there's two different lives here. One is life of himself, and the other is life imparted to in virtue of being a creature. The human nature is created. The divine nature is uncreated.
Right. But was his life put into the human nature?
Was his divine life put into his human life? No, I already told you that they're
Huh?
incommunicable.
So, so his life wasn't in the human nature.
His divine life was
Hmm.
not in his human nature.
Right.
Correct.
So
Because
all
what
right.
that
So
would do then, what that would mean then is that the human nature wasn't actually a human nature. The human nature that Christ assumed is the identical human nature that we assumed, yet without sin.
right. So that's where we have the big division. And so what I'm saying is that God transferred his life into the human, so that when he died, it was a proper death according to Leviticus. That's what I believe. But you seem to be saying something different. Confounded.
He put his life into it.
Yeah.
Here's the problem: the life of which God has is he's ase, he's of himself.
Hmm.
He's self-existent.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make any sense. Now you would just be you'd be eliminating the creator creature distinction. There's a creator creature distinction, and you would be eliminating that. And if you were to say that he put his life, his
Hmm.
divine life, in
Hmm.
the human nature, well, then my question would be, how can he die? How can he change? How can he do all these things of which you have, pressed me with?
No, because of what death is. As we both agree, death isn't a place where your soul is destroyed.
Yeah, but he still faced physical death. So that's a change. God cannot
Yeah,
change. God is
yeah,
immutable. So if he
yeah,
put
but
his divine life in the human life and they meshed them together, right? So
yeah,
like if you took red and blue, you make what, green or purple, right? That's not what happens when we're speaking about the divine nature and the human nature. They don't mesh together to make a third substance. That's what you would have in your position. What we're
No.
saying is that they're united together. They remain distinct from each other, but united.
Right. Yeah, no. What I'm essentially saying is that what we're saying here seems to match my belief better, simply because of the fact that his whole life had to be in that human blood in order to satisfy Leviticus 11.
Confounded.
Number one, your position is refuted grammatically.
Okay.
What you're asserting into this text is what you think in your mind logically makes sense. And all that you're saying is, I'm putting myself above God. I'm putting my own human reason above God. God's word explicitly says what it says. I've already brought you through the grammar of it and the syntax of it as well. It literally tells us that he presently and actively existed in the form of God, and that the emptying of himself was by way of addition, an addition of a human nature. So the grammar has already refuted you on that. That's the problem with Unitarians is they have this autonomous reason of their own. They're rationalists in their thinking. They think that you guys think that you have this whole logic going on, but it's not what the scripture teaches.
Yeah. Well, but I think after what you said here now, I can see why any position which isn't Trinitarian would actually make more sense, because then it can validate Leviticus 11 properly. So it looks like I didn't even realize that Trinitarians had this extra problem, admittedly.